breakfast.
Ha-ha. Oh, good morning and welcome to Comics for Breakfast. I'm your host, Jason Mink, and hey, as you can tell, I've got Halloween on the brain. Today, we're going to take a look at 31 of my all-time favorite spooky comics. That's right, it is the season, so let's get right to it. We're going to jump in with Adventures into the Unknown, number 59, and it's a pre-code cutie from our friends at the American Comics Group, featuring their patented black frame technology, which made the images appear to be in 3D. Didn't really work out so well, but when you have a story about puppets that burn a guy alive, well, you know, you're already most of the way there. 3D doesn't really have to do a whole lot of heavy lifting in that case. Then we have, of course, it's Archie. And this is number 125. Archie is going to rent a monster. And for $1, well, that's a great deal. I guess we all know in 2021 how expensive renting a monster is, even for just an hour. So Archie would do well to get in on that. If you watched the last 3 Man's $5, you know I'm a big fan of Evil Dead. Evil Dead 2 and its sequel, Army of Darkness. And this is the Dark Horse adaptation. And this was written by Sam Raimi, Ivan Raimi, and with phenomenal painted artwork by John Bolton. And let me tell you, as much as I love those movies, this comic is the superior adaptation of the Army of Darkness script. John was able to go in and really elaborate on scenes that Sam and Bruce may have had to skip over in the interest of just getting the movie done. But this is a wonderful exploration of that world if you enjoy Army of Darkness, the Necronomicon, and all things dark in general. You might get a kick out of that book. Speaking of, here's ARG number 4, and as a kid, I was intensely fascinated by the show Kolchak the Night Stalker, and I would occasionally catch an episode here or there. It was rare that I was allowed to stay up that late, but when I did, and I realized that, every week I might catch the adventures of a semi-bumbling reporter stumbling across supernatural menaces all throughout America, well, you could bet that I was hooked. And this is a fun little satire from our friends at Marvel Comics. And then what do we have? It is Avengers, number 152, and as far as Avengers comics go, well, there aren't really a lot of spooky covers per se, but I would say that this is definitely one. Simon Williams being raised from the dead, rising from the murky bayou as the other Avengers stand by, helpless to stop it. That is right. What a phenomenal cover this is. And it's a Kirby cover, so you can't beat that. Check out those skulls. Wow, talk about delivering the goods. And then, speaking of delivering the goods, Charles Versfeld was nice enough to hook me up with this copy of Batman. This is the 100-page spectacular, number 255, and it features that new Batman shocker, Moon of the Wolf. This story was a knockout, as well as all of the wonderful reprints in here. Robin Battles, the Crazy Quilt, Batgirl's Big Surprise, and Batman's Father, which I was always intensely fascinated by Thomas Wayne and his kooky Batman costume, at least until, well, DC decided to run that shit into the ground, didn't they? Then we have Daredevil 91, The Man Without Fear, and this is an introduction issue, Mr. Fear. And what self-respecting kid could possibly say no to that? And there's Daredevil once again about to fall off a building. We've talked about Daredevil and falling off of tall buildings before, and well, here at least he's hanging on, and who knows, maybe there's a good chance he could take this guy with him. But Mr. Fear, well, we all know that he keeps coming back for more. Then we have Dead of Night featuring the Scarecrow. This is a phenomenal issue, absolutely. Bernie Wrightson, Gil Kane team-up cover, and the story within was very interesting, very 1970s. A little bit on the confusing side, but you gotta read it to believe it, folks. This one is great. It had been haunting dollar bins for years until folks wised up, but if you have the opportunity, well, you should grab yourself a copy of Dead of Night number 11. Don't you ever miss it. And oh yeah, baby, speaking of never missing it, someone had posted in the group a while back their copy of Elvira's House of Mystery number 3, and as lovely as this cover is, well, it's gonna be that splash page that really gets your attention. And I believe that this was in a batch of comics that was sent up to the archive by Adam Seagard. So thank you so very much for that, Adam. Teenage Mink thanks you especially. Always been a big Elvira fan. Then we have Fear number 1. And this is a fat-packed anthology. That is right. 64 pages, if I'm not mistaken, for only 25 cents. You get Monstrum, the Dweller from the Black Swamp, and so many more. Look at this guy. Fun stuff. And then we have, this is a great issue. This is the Modern Comics reprint of Charlton's Ghostly Haunts. And this has just mind-bending Tom Sutton cover. I mean, imagine flipping through the dollar bins, seeing junk, 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 junk. Boom! And I had actually picked this up initially when Bug-Eyed Monster, which was a comic book store in Wilkinsburg, had gone out of business. I got it for like $0.25. My copy is long gone, but I was able to replace it once again out of the dollar bin. And, well, here's a book that's a little more expensive. I don't find these in the dollar bins, but I do love Tippy's Friend, Go-Go. That is right, with this beautiful Sam Schwartz cover. And here Tippy is flying her guitar in front of a vibrant autumn moon. Stunning stuff. And then what do we have? All right, now, 7, 8, and 9 of The Invaders. It's all part of one big story, but I didn't see those first 2 issues when I was a kid growing up. I had missed them, but we had gone to visit my grandmother in the hospital at that point in time. She was terminally ill, and to keep me quiet, we stopped at the gift shop, and my parents had bought me a copy of Invaders, and I had the opportunity to buy some candy. For some reason, I bought a pack of Certs Winto Green. Should have gone for the 5 flavor. I don't know what I was thinking, but I remember sitting there by the waning light of the window while my parents were sort of across the room with my grandmother, you know, reading this comic book, and it was storming outside. So it was very intense. It was very dramatic. It's Union Jack versus Baron Blood. The end. And while both of these characters did come back eventually, there was a degree of intensity, of finality to it that makes this one of my favorite Halloween comics. I mean, come on, Marvel Vampires. Hard to beat that. And the only way you could possibly beat that is by Archie Exorcism Comics. That is right. It's Josie and the Pussycats, tops in TV. And once again, we've talked about this on Comics for Breakfast as well. This is one of the all-time greatest Josie issues, if not Archie issues in the world. It's Vengeance from the Crypt. And man alive, if you don't have this one, if you track down any of these comic books today, this is the one you want, folks, because, hoo boy, was it intense. Okay, and then we have Another Archie. This is Life with Archie. Meet the Creeps. That is right, and the kids are certainly startled by these monster analogs, for sure. Probably because of Frank's magenta suit coat there, but I'd be lying if I said that I wouldn't wear that if I had the opportunity. Gosh knows, that is 150% style, my friend. And then here's Lois Lane marrying Satan. I guess that's not one of the wildest things she's ever done, for sure, but it's certainly a beautiful cover. And Miss Lane, very fetching in horns and a cloven hoof. You know it. And then we have Archie's Madhouse. Here I am, beating that Archie drum once again. But this one is very cool because most of the time, Madhouse had a tendency to focus on non-Archie characters. But here we get old Jughead coming on into the castle. And we get the old witch, a werewolf, a vampire, and this happy little fella. And I can't wait to make his acquaintance. Who knows? Maybe they'll all go out for hamburgers together. And then here is the revival of Madhouse from the 1970s. And this book, what a knockout, let me tell you. This features some beautiful art, some mind-bending stories for certain. Probably pop a few of those up on the screen just so you can get an idea. But once again, this is the kind of book that you can find in a dollar box up to this point in time. So I'm telling you, these 1970s Archie Madhouse, if you just love to read comics, man, get in while the getting is good. Speaking of the getting being good, it was Marvel Premiere and Doctor Strange. That was back when they were sort of testing the waters. Marvel wanted to see if the Doc could carry his own book. And this is pretty interesting here. This is obviously meant to evoke H.P. Lovecraft's The Shadow over Innsmouth. It's the spawn of Slingeth. And I was going to talk about this. The Doc heads into a creepy New England town and is attacked by a bunch of inbred weirdos. But, well, I had to hit on this as well, which is number 6, where, wouldn't you know it, old Cthulhu shows up. That is right. Apparently the stars were right. And, wow, once again, what a knockout. It's the Shambler from the Seas. Make sure you have plenty of tartar sauce on hand for that, my friends. Then Marvel Spotlight. It is the son of Satan, brother and sister, in a battle to the death. That's right, it's an Osmondoff. Donnie and Marie in Doom is the Devil's Daughter. And I gotta tell you, as a kid, well, I know who I would have been voting for. Boy, howdy. And then it's Mr. Monster, number 1. That is right. Michael Gilbert's immortal character continues to soldier on to this point. This is number 1, and happy to have this in the collection. I've made it a point to pick up pretty much anything with Mr. Monster in it because they're always tremendously entertaining reads. Mr. Gilbert is a wonderful gentleman and a accommodating host. It was great to be able to talk to him a while back, and once again, if you've never read this title, well, you're going to want to get in while you can because these books, they can be found inexpensively, but they're definitely some of the jewels. They're the gold nuggets in your dollar bin. And then what do we have? Speaking of gold nuggets, it's the Occult Files of Dr. Spectre. And this is dynamite. That is right. This is the first run of this particular story. Gold Key reissued it later on, and you might be familiar with the more cartoon version of this, but this is the painted cover. And what a cover it is. Next up, it's Rib Tickler number 7. And don't ask me, I don't know. What can I say? Ordinarily, I don't buy comics like this, but I was enchanted by its sense of fun and whimsy. I really like the little scene that's being played out here for sure, including that haunted house on the hill. Always wanted to rent that place, but someone's always in there, unfortunately. And then we have the Phantom Stranger and the Spectre of the Stalking Swamp. Somehow we missed this guy on our last Muck Men of the 70s Comics for Breakfast. Maybe we should revisit that theme. There were a lot of Muck Men back then. And then here is Scary Tales, number 13. And I love this cover. It is iconic. It is archetypal. It's the sort of thing that you can put on a book, a comic, even a lunchbox, and a kid would go crazy for it. What a beautiful image. And then what do we have? Oh, the comic is backwards. That's because it's so exciting, folks. It's Peter Parker, the Spectacular Spider-Man number 8. And this is the wrap-up to a exciting 3-issue showdown with Morbius. It's the final battle with Morbius, only not really. But I remember as a kid, my friends and I, we were gathered under the streetlight as the sun was setting. Our parents were calling us to come inside, and we were desperately flipping through this book, trying to get to the end, trying to see what the resolution was. Because Spidey versus vampires, well, you know, that's peanut butter and chocolate to a kid like me. So this is definitely one of my favorite Halloween books. Beautiful Paul Gulacy cover. And then we have Superboy and the Wolf Boy of Smallville. Now, apparently DC was doing their best to have their cake and eat it too. You know, they wanted to stick with the comics code, but at the same time, they wanted to court that I was a teenage ... crowd. And so here we have the Wolf Boy of Smallville, and his wolfness is indicated by his slightly mussed hair and some lines on him. I don't know. Okay, DC, whatever you say. And then we have Swamp Thing. That is right, not She-Thing. That's a completely different list. And this is number 10. This is a eye-popping Bernie Wrightson cover. That is right, it is the Swamp Thing versus the Unmen. And you can imagine how this thing would have stood out on the newsstand back in the day. And then, you know, if we're talking old comics, I'm going to talk a little bit about Atlas Comics. Here is their anthology. It's Tales of Evil. And we begin with a nice little werewolf cover here. But we wrap things up with a character that Atlas was doing their best to generate some hype for. It was Man-Monster. And I remember seeing him advertised in Atlas Comics at the time and thinking like, wow, that's pretty intense. But sadly, nothing much came of them. You know, with all these revivals of comic book characters, I want to know, where's my Man-Monster movie? You know what I'm saying? How cool would this thing be? No one ever listens. No one never cares. Then here's Tales Too Terrible to Tell from New England Comics Press. And these are dynamite because not only do they feature pre-code horror comics that you can't live without, but they also have essays, letter columns, lists, and so much more. And these were wonderful publications. These are no longer being produced, but if you have the opportunity to pick them up, pick them up. Doesn't matter what issue, because they're all great. You heard it from Mink. And then we have The Tomb of Dracula, number 2. Now, Tomb of Dracula, number 1, probably out of my reach financially, but I was able to pick up 2 because it was a reasonable price. And I really like this book because the Marvel Dracula mythos isn't quite set yet. You know, you don't have all those characters showing up month to month, arguing. You know, this is a nice little just story about Dracula doing his thing in London or, you know, some foggy place. Who stole my coffin? Have to get to the bottom of that one. And then we have Tower of Shadows. Now here's Marvel dipping their toe in horror. Apparently right around the early 70s, the Comics Code was letting up a bit as far as their restrictions went on horrific material. And so here's Marvel doing the gothic thing. You know, we got this sort of Boris Karloff looking dude here. And initially these were original stories hosted by Digger. But eventually, well, because it's Marvel, the book morphed into those good old dependable reprints. And wouldn't you know it, it's Titano, the monster that time forgot. But apparently the folks in the paste-up department didn't. And then what do we have? It's Giant-Sized Werewolf, number 4. Now, growing up as a kid, I didn't really see those Marvel horror titles all that much. I don't know if they were so popular that they were sold out by the time I got to the newsstand, or, well, they just didn't carry them at all. But somehow I always missed out. But I was a mark for Marvel monsters, and here we have 2 of the greatest. It's the Werewolf by Night battling Morbius, the living vampire, in 2 blockbusting book-length full-moon thrillers. Wow, copy editor was really earning their money that day. It's The Moon That Dripped Blood. And then wrapping things up, why not? It's Weird War. And this was another title that I didn't really see as a kid, but I certainly would have gone for. I mean, Frankenstein, a Dracula, and a werewolf versus Nazis? Oh, man, I couldn't have given you my 50 cents fast enough. But, books like this are great for this time of year. That said, no matter what you choose to read, make it a point to read something. Anything. Go through your archives, maybe jump online and see what's available in the public domain comics forums, or even look at one of those apps on your phone. If you're desperate, because ultimately, well, you can't beat that old comic smell. Sometimes that's the spookiest thing of all. I'm Jason Mink. Thank you for joining us on this Comics for Breakfast. I hope to see you next week. Cheers.